On the night of June 5th, 2002, a 14-year-old girl was taken from her own bedroom in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah. What followed would become one of the most closely watched missing child cases in American history. The intruder entered the home by cutting through a window screen. Inside the bedroom, the victim's younger sister, only 9 years old, was awake but pretended to be asleep, paralyzed by fear that the intruder might return. The young girl waited approximately 2 hours before alerting her parents. By then, her sister had vanished into the darkness of the surrounding mountains. A desperate search was about to begin. Brian David Mitchell was a drifter and self-proclaimed religious figure who roamed the streets of Salt Lake City. He presented himself as a prophet, adopting the name Emmanuel and wearing flowing robes. Mitchell had been hired by the family as a handyman for brief work at their home. The family knew him only by his alias. It was a connection that would later prove devastating. His wife, Wanda Barzee, shared his extremist beliefs. On the night of the abduction, Barzee was waiting at a crude mountainside campsite. She was not a bystander. She was a full participant in the crime. Mitchell used religious manipulation to control the young victim. He forced her into a so-called polygamous marriage ceremony and subjected her to sustained abuse over the months that followed. During the 9 months of captivity, Mitchell and Barzee moved the victim to San Diego County, California, before eventually returning to Utah. The young girl was kept hidden in plain sight. Mitchell also attempted to kidnap the victim's cousin several weeks after the initial abduction. The brazenness of this second attempt underscored the danger he posed and the urgency of the search. From the moment the abduction was reported, Salt Lake City became the center of one of the largest missing child searches in the country. Thousands of volunteers combed the foothills surrounding the city. Investigators received over 16,000 tips during the 9-month investigation. The sheer volume of information was both a resource and a challenge, overwhelming detectives at every turn. Early investigative leads pointed in the wrong direction. Contractor Richard Ricci became a person of interest, but he was ultimately ruled out. Ricci died of a brain hemorrhage during the investigation, leaving one false lead tragically unresolved. The sole witness to the abduction was the victim's younger sister, who was only 9 years old. The weight of the case rested in part on the fragile memory of a child who had been terrified into silence. Then, roughly 4 months after the abduction, a breakthrough. The younger sister recalled the kidnapper's voice while looking through a Guinness Book of World Records picture book. She identified him as the man the family knew as Emmanuel. Police created a composite sketch based on the sister's description, but the sketch was not released to the public until February 2003, months after it was completed. The family expressed frustration at the delay. The family alleged that police had been slow to act on the Emmanuel lead. Some accounts suggest tensions between investigators and the Smart family over the handling of the sketch. Police have disputed that characterization. Mitchell's own sister recognized the composite sketch and contacted authorities, confirming it resembled her brother. It was the first concrete identification linking Brian David Mitchell to the crime. With the name now attached to the composite sketch, investigators shifted their focus entirely to Brian David Mitchell. His background as a drifting self-proclaimed prophet fit the profile of the man called Emmanuel. The composite sketch and photographs of Mitchell were aired on America's Most Wanted in mid-February 2003. The broadcast reached millions of viewers across the country and generated an immediate response. The broadcast proved pivotal. In the weeks that followed, tips began to focus on sightings in the Salt Lake City metro area. Mitchell, Barzee, and the victim had returned to Utah and were hiding remarkably close to the family home. On March 12, 2003, two separate couples spotted Mitchell, Barzee, and a young woman walking along a street in the Salt Lake City suburb of Sandy, Utah, about 15 miles south of the victim's home. Both couples called police independently. The victim had been disguised in a gray wig, sunglasses, and flowing robes. Despite Mitchell's efforts to conceal her identity, the bystanders recognized him from the broadcast and acted immediately. Police responded quickly and separated the trio on the street. Officers confirmed the young woman's identity. After 9 months of captivity, the missing girl had been found alive. The rescue on March 12, 2003, ended one of the most harrowing kidnapping cases in modern American history, but the road to justice would take years longer than anyone expected. Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee were both arrested on March 12, 2003, the same day the victim was rescued, but Mitchell's legal strategy would delay his trial for years. Mitchell was found incompetent to stand trial on multiple occasions. The competency hearings stretched across years, frustrating the victim's family and the public alike. It was not until 2010, 8 years after the crime, that Mitchell was declared competent to face a federal jury. The long delay tested the patience of everyone involved in the case. Wanda Barzee took a different legal path. In November 2009, she pleaded guilty to federal kidnapping charges and agreed to cooperate against Mitchell. Her testimony would prove significant. Barzee also pleaded guilty in state court to attempted kidnapping charges related to the plot against the victim's cousin. Her cooperation helped prosecutors build an airtight federal case against Mitchell. With Barzee's cooperation secured and Mitchell finally declared competent, the stage was set for one of the most anticipated trials in Utah's history. The nation was watching. Mitchell's federal trial began on November 8, 2010, in Salt Lake City. His defense team conceded that he had committed the crimes, but mounted an insanity defense, arguing he was driven by genuine religious delusion. The survivor took the stand and testified about what she endured during 9 months of captivity. Her testimony was measured and direct, a powerful moment that underscored her courage. Prosecutors argued that Mitchell's behavior was calculated and deliberate, not the product of insanity. The jury would have to decide whether his religious claims were genuine delusion or a cynical manipulation. On December 10, 2010, the federal jury delivered its verdict. Brian David Mitchell was found guilty of kidnapping and unlawful transportation of a minor across state lines. The insanity defense had failed. On May 25, 2011, U.S. District Judge Dale Kimball sentenced Mitchell to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Mitchell is currently incarcerated at Federal Correctional Institution, Lewisburg in Pennsylvania. Wanda Barzee was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She was released early in September 2018 after a recalculation credited her time served, and she is a registered sex offender living in Salt Lake City. In the years since her rescue, the survivor has become one of the most prominent child safety advocates in the United States. She founded the Elizabeth Smart Foundation in 2011 to educate and protect children. Her advocacy has shaped legislation, inspired policy changes, and given a public voice to survivors of abduction and abuse. She has spoken to audiences around the world about resilience and recovery. The case also exposed critical gaps in how law enforcement handled missing child investigations. The delayed release of the composite sketch and the initially misdirected leads prompted scrutiny of investigative procedures. The case remains one of the rare kidnapping stories with a living survivor ending. It serves as a reminder that persistence, from a 9-year-old witness, from a family that never stopped searching, and from the public, can bring someone home. A Netflix documentary renewed public interest in 2026, bringing a new generation face to face with this story. But the most important chapter was written by the survivor herself, in the life she chose to build after captivity. Elizabeth Smart was held captive for 9 months. She has now spent more than 2 decades making sure no child's voice goes unheard again. A new case drops every day. Subscribe so you never miss one.